Welcome. In this video, I will show you how to prepare a sample for NMR analysis and how to obtain an NMR spectrum. So this is what our NMR spectrometer in the lab will look like. The red is the benchtop NMR, and on the computer is where you will process your data. First, your sample, which may be a solid, an oil, or a liquid, will need to be dissolved in deuterated solvent. You will need about 0.7 mils of deuterated solvent, which is a little bit less than half a pipette full. This deuterated solvent will be next to the NMR, or will be provided to you by your TA. Next, you want to make sure that your sample is thoroughly dissolved. Cap your solvent, and then transfer your dissolved sample by pipetting this onto a clean NMR tube. Then you want to cap your tube, and finally, ensure that your NMR tube is clean and dry by wiping off the outside of the tube using a Kim wipe. And you're ready to insert this to the NMR instrument. Next, you will place your NMR tube into a spinner. The spinner is the top white part. You want to insert your NMR tube and then slowly pull from the bottom until you feel a slight tug. You want to be careful so your NMR cap does not pop off in the process. Again, that's from the top, and then pull until it tugs. Next, you want to place the spinner back into the gauge, and you want to push from the top until it fits the gauge. This allows for your NMR tube on the spinner to be adjusted to the correct height. You can also check if you have enough sample. You will need to have at least this height or above this circle, or twice as much as this. And finally, you want to take the spinner with your NMR tube and slowly lower your sample straight down into the NMR. Next, you will acquire your NMR spectrum as follows. First, remove your gloves to use the computer. The Spinsolve program should already be open on the screen. And usually the settings should already be set by your TA, or you want to double check that all the settings are correct and ready for a proton NMR. These settings are: 1. That the solvent should be chloroform, or the solvent your compound is dissolved in. 2. Enter a file name, which is usually your initial, your name, and then the compound's name. And 3. That the standard 1-minute long run is selected. And lastly, you want to hit this green start button. And what you'll notice is that you'll see the progress scan on the left side of the screen. And even as you see your spectrum will start to show up, you want to wait until you see the total number of scans is complete. This usually happens when the green start button shows up again. Next, you will need to process your spectrum in MestreNOVA by clicking the MNOVA button on the bottom right of this window. As the MNOVA window opens, you will see your spectrum show up. Usually it is automatically labeled. Otherwise, you will need to go to the Analysis tab, click Analysis, and then Integration, and then hit Auto Detect. If this is not automatically integrated for you, you want to delete all of these integrations by going to the Analysis and Delete All. To manually integrate the peaks, you want to go to Analysis tab, click Integration, and then click Manual. Then on the spectrum, you want to click and drag on the peaks of interest. It is generally advised to predict the peaks you expect to observe so you don't integrate a peak that is actually just residual solvent or deuterated solvent peak. Manually integrating also avoids improper selection of irrelevant peaks, such as this peak in label C. In your post lab, you will need to complete a table that looks like this. Use your NMR spectrum and use this table containing the common NMR shifts in NMR spectroscopy, which is found in the lab manual. Assignment is the type of hydrogen. Integration is the bottom value here. And peak in parts per million is just the labels on the top. If your integration does not total to the expected number of hydrogens in your product, this is actually just the ratio of each type of hydrogens. So for instance, here we have 5 as a total integration, and your product is expected to have 10 hydrogens. So you will just need to multiply this value by 2, giving you 10 hydrogens. Lastly, you want to save your spectrum. You want to hit File, Save As, and you want to check that your file name is correct. So this is usually your initials or your lab partner's initials and the product compound's name. And you want to save this as a .png file type. You cannot open it if you mistakenly save it as .MNOVA. So save it as .png. And then you want to save your spectrum to your flash drive or check that it is saved to the right folder, and then your TA will email it to you. The last thing is to remove your NMR tube from the instrument. So while MNOVA is open, the next person is actually free to remove your sample from the NMR and then place their sample as long as all scans have been completed. To remove your sample, you want to slowly remove it from the NMR, push from the bottom, and then place the next person's NMR tube into the spinner. And then again, you want to adjust the height as before. Otherwise, you must replace the NMR standard in the spinner and then adjust the height. So adjust the tip to never leave the spinner or the instrument empty.